Hello, everyone. You're watching Speak Your Mind with Dr. Ryger, our weekly series on the psychology of societal change. I'm Nezha and I, the founder and CEO of Join Mayshad, a New York-based company that empowers women on a daily basis. I'm here today with Dr. Ryger, our clinical psychologist and investor in Mayshad, and joining us is our special guest speaker, Glendy Yeung. Hi, Dr. Ryger.
Hi, Nessa. How are you doing today?
Great, thank you. Today's theme is the new face of exhaustion. It came about during many conversations that we had with the women in our Mayshad network. No matter if we are corporate executives, owners, or in transition ourselves, the constant feeling of being tired, overwhelmed, drained has come up time and time again. Can we discuss this today, Dr. Ryger? Can you please tell us, when we've been in confinement for God knows how long and physically more steady, how come we can still feel exhausted?
One of the things that we need to think about is that exhaustion isn't just one phenomenon, that there are different components of exhaustion. And it might be helpful for us to really be able to dive in together and to sort out as well. So that exhaustion can take three forms, but they're not mutually exclusive. And so that you can really have the trifecta of exhaustion. And that's the physical exhaustion, mental exhaustion, and emotional exhaustion. And, certainly physical exhaustion, if we've been doing a lot, we may be doing more housekeeping. We may be lifting more. There may be things that we're doing in our lives that are not specifically what we're used to doing, as well as, times that we can get out and we can exercise and do things like that. So that there's the physical exhaustion. There's a mental exhaustion in terms of perhaps needing to plan differently and plan about things that we didn't have to plan about before. How to get the groceries we need, where we're going to find them. Are we going to get deliveries? Are we going to do curbside pickups? Are we going into stores? Which ones are we comfortable in? Where are we not comfortable? And really being involved in this type of mental processing, not only of our daily living, but then also when it comes to our work life. As people who have been working, in physical proximity to one another, have now pivoted into a virtual work landscape, and all of the mental intellectual components that go along with that, and challenges, including doing everything virtually and being exposed to a level of technology that perhaps we haven't been exposed to before. In addition to that, we also have the emotional component of dealing with the feelings of our own feelings during this time, the feelings of people we love and care about, perhaps our children, a spouse, a partner, extended family, dear friends of ours. And so it's really just such a hot pot instead of a hot spot, but really a hot pot for these three different types of exhaustion to converge. So step one, Neza, would be important to try to be able to sort it out, so it all doesn't just feel like one big kind of like ball of Play-Doh of exhaustion. When your kids played with Play-Doh and there'd be little pieces here, you take it and you make it a ball, that we don't turn it into one big ball, but we're able to pull the pieces apart. Not that they're not interconnected, but that we be able to identify what our experience is as a first step in being able to deal with it.
I definitely get it, and you're explaining it very well with the three bodies, and the physical exhaustion is the one that we can be the most aware, because we feel it in our muscles. We know that we've been physically challenged, but the emotional and the psychological one are the ones that people do not notice. Stress. We can be stressed about our own projects, but is there and unnoticed stress that can happen to us by just consuming so much information, so much data, being on the phone the whole day, watching the news, and feeling all that anxiety that comes with all this information that we get and we cannot act on.
Yes, and I'm very glad that you brought up this specifically, this type of fatigue, because the first thing is that we really need to investigate whether or not, we're having any type of medical issue. And medical issues just aren't about COVID, but we can also have any, other types of medical issues as well. So it's very important that you gain clarity. And if you're having prolonged fatigue, to speak with your physician and see if there's something happening with you medically. In addition to that, as a psychologist, I also must put, front and forward also that people are having anxiety, and having anxiety can be different than feeling anxious. Having depression is different than feeling depressed or feeling sad. And that it's really important that we be able to identify our mental health, our emotional health, and to sort that out. And if you're unclear about that, call someone, call your physician, get in touch. If you need referrals, there's lots of ways of doing this, and don't leave yourself hanging. So that, at this time with so much uncertainty, Neza, that it's very understandable for people to be worried and for people to feel anxious and people to feel stressed. And not only are we feeling anxious and stressed or worried for ourselves and maybe our work and wanting to be able to do the best job that we can do, and dealing with what we're not able to implement, finding other ways and being able to pivot in new and creative kinds of ways, which really bring more challenge to us. And then, of course, how children are being affected, children living at home, when their schooling has been disrupted, their summers may be disrupted, the kinds of routines that you've had have been disrupted, and that to sit down with yourself and give yourself a few minutes to really take inventory and to be able to sort out a little bit of what's coming from where for yourself, whether it's physical, emotional, mental, where it's coming from in terms of, is it work? And it's not one choice or another. You can check all the boxes: work, relationships, yourself, whatever that is. And sometimes if we can offload it from our heads onto paper, or even talking it into Siri, so that we don't just have it keep rolling around in our heads, that's very important. I mean, in this show today, not only we're talking about exhaustion and what it is and why it is and where it's coming from, but we're also very much talking about exhaustion and what we can do to actually, fight exhaustion in a constructive and empowering way for ourselves.
It is a critical time to talk about this, because we also went through a lot of uncertainties, and now we have a little peaceful time where we need to work on our immune system, and then more uncertainties that come also with the fall and what is going to happen for our kids going back to school and us going back to work, and how do we live with this new reality that is just there with us. And so yes, I think the exhaustion is directly linked to the immune system. We're lucky today because we have a psychology specialist and we have an energy specialist, and Glendy will get to talk about what we can do from our homes to our rooms and our inner self. Dr. Ryger, what can employers do to help employees through exhaustion?
That is such an important question, especially for this time and especially for the kinds of pivoting and leadership that is essential. And that leadership now has to also encompass being a caring leader and being a compassionate leader. And so people may need times to take breaks, and especially now when there are virtual meetings, perhaps one after the other, after the other. And that even when we were at meetings before, we could walk to the meeting, get a drink of water, get a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, run to the bathroom, whatever it may be. At this point, with one meeting after the other, that there are times when it becomes important to allow and insist that people take a break or that people take breaks, that there's time allotted for lunch, and so that there isn't an expectation, even though there's a communication that we really want you to take care of yourself, right? That there's that, and that's very, very well-meaning. However, at the same time, that also needs to be implemented in a way that is part of the expectation of your job. There's a law firm I know of, for example, where they really want the people working at the firm to take time for themselves so that they get actual client credit for taking time to meditate. And so there are ways of really communicating and making it part of policy that taking care of yourself is part of the expectation of being a team member and of working in this company and in this environment. And that this notion of go, 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 don't stop. If you're really dedicated, you don't take care of yourself is really not the model that we need right now. Because one of the things that we've talked about is that we are in a marathon. We are not in a sprint. We can't just put our pedal to the metal and just, take it home. That we need to be able to pace ourselves. And burning out is not going to help anyone, and is especially not going to help at work. Because if you're burnt out, it's not possible to bring your best. So that the idea and the implementation of taking care of oneself is really essential. And one of the things that everyone really needs to do is one, have a ritual for themselves and create especially a morning ritual so that you don't have to think about it, that this is what you do. You take whatever time you have and you use it in a way that works for you. So whether it's waking up in the morning, having your cup of tea in peace, taking time to meditate, taking time to stretch, taking time to do a little bit of exercise, whatever that is, that there's something that you do, that you nourish yourself both emotionally and physically as well, and make sure that you eat decently, that you're sleeping decently, that these are the components that you're taking in that's really essential for you to be able to take care, and not only in that way, but also to help with your immune system. We need to not deplete ourselves, but we need to enrich ourselves. And that we also create, I know I'm giving you a bunch of things here. And so if you want, I'll just let you know, please let me know if you're interested in a resource at Dr. R at expertinchange.com. And I'm happy to provide some resources for you. But that we also have in advance a list of what can I do to replenish my energy. And that you create your own list. So when the time comes, you don't have to then start thinking, try to remember what it is that you had remembered before that you can't remember now, that you need it, but that you have a go-to and you can put 4 things down, 5 things down, whatever it is. And the most important thing is to choose something. Do something. Anything that you do, regardless of how long you're doing it for, Nezha, anything that you do is better than doing nothing.
All the companies that have been trying to develop a culture of positive space, positive environment for their employees, everything just disappeared in those times in uncertainty because that environment was linked to a physical space. And I have talked to women in the financial environment that needs a lot of compliance who told me that they need to be on Skype the whole day and they need their light to be green because that's a little bit the shift to the virtual world. And they spent literally the first 2 months not leaving the screen because they had to justify that. And of course, no one asked them to. They just told them, please, like let us know. You need to give a notice when you're standing up. And so, to all the women that are listening to us, you need to understand that those processes are still new, and the people that are behind the corporation also don't know how to collaborate in this unknown. So we need to be a little bit more expressive on, yes, we need to take our time, and yes, we need our breaks. So leaving the personal stress of going through COVID, leaving the personal stress of having a family at home and being at home, and on top of it, living with this work shift, Dr. Ryger, don't you think that it's important for people to notice that burnouts during this time, even if we were someone who felt that we're strong, we're doing our yoga, we did so many things that doesn't make us feel that we're vulnerable, yet we still can be subject to exhaustion now more than ever?
The idea that, there's a lot of super women who are going to be hearing this and watching, whether you're here with us now or whether you'll be joining us on YouTube or where we're posting this, that we're not used to the red light. We're not used to a stop sign. We see a stop sign. I think we slow down for the stop sign, but we don't come to a full stop. And that it's really so crucial that we make the stops for ourselves, even during this time of iteration, because we're trying. No one has the answers here. No one, but we can just try to be responsive, not reactive, but responsive for the moment. And the more that perhaps we can really help our companies understand that there needs to be a break, that people have a right to have lunch, and that there's such dedication and people really want to do and give, especially during these times of tremendous struggles. And there's a tremendous amount of responsibility on people to make something happen, keep something going, be there, be there in face, be there in body, be there in spirit, be there in energy for their teams. And that to be that example, and that part of being that example is also being the example of someone who takes care of themselves, and that's to be emulated as well. And so to start figuring out, how do people have downtime? Because one of the things that's happened while people are at home is that while you're at home anyway, so you might as well be on this call, be at this other meeting, show up for this, have another kind of meeting. And so the boundaries that may have existed before between work life and home life, I mean, certainly if you went into an office, you were not at home, that you could have these sorts of boundaries in your life that aren't necessarily happening right now. And so, the people that you work with are, you're now in their home and they're in your home, and you hear crying babies, you hear, a vacuum cleaner is going, there's all sorts of ways that we can be more human with each other. And that can be really a lovely part of it. And at the same time, there's always the yin and the yang. And the other side of the coin is that there also isn't a boundary between work life and and home life of being able to go into your home and close the door and turn your phone off. So that there can be, to start to, unless, it's critical, unless it's truly emergency, that there's a time when you're perhaps not expected to be available. That if you take an hour, and you're not available, that it doesn't mean that you're less than, less committed, less devoted, less of a team player. And so this is some of the pivoting, Neza, that also needs to happen now.
And as an entrepreneur or business owner, or sometimes even working for a corporation, we used to be out the whole day. Mm-hmm. And so our mind is also, there is an adrenaline that comes with it. And I see psychological exhaustion when I put myself in a classroom or in a conference. And here I see myself like that student in the first row that starts yawning and wanting to fall asleep. And that's when I drink my caffeine that I never drink otherwise, because I need that to keep myself awake. And so my mind is stimulated differently. And so my mind is stimulated when I'm active on the field as an entrepreneur, and I can work for 17 hours in a row. And you sit me for 4 hours to listen to a content, and I need to grasp every piece of it because it's so interesting, and you feel that mental fatigue. How do you explain that?
It's really exhausting. And we're used to, for those of us who don't work virtually, we're used to having just the kind of the ease of casual meeting up with someone. Even if we meet somebody as we're, literally walking to the bathroom or walking to get a glass of water or doing whatever, that there's a casual meetup and there's an energy that comes with that. There's an energy of being in proximity. And I think that, and I experienced this when I went virtually, which is that I found myself, I kept going closer to the screen and closer to the screen because I felt that, and I didn't realize it at first, but then I realized, like, why am I doing this? It's like, like the little kids, it was like they're putting their faces in the screen. It's like, why am I doing this? And I realized that without the three-dimensionality, that there's like a sensory deprivation. And so I kept going forward to try to get more input and more of that stimulation. I mean, here we are, we're existing for each other, like basically, from the chest up. And not even from the waist up, but really from the chest up. And that this is where our existence is in terms of being able to be communicative. And there's so much that we pick up on from people's body language, and we're just like not getting that. And so on the one hand, although we're in overload, we're also simultaneously in deprivation. We're in stimulus overload with the news and the latest information, and making sure we have our masks, and making sure that that we have hand sanitizer, or we're coping with that. And so we're on the one hand in overload and in overwhelm, and on the other hand we're in deprivation. And so, we have whoever we're living with, and maybe, as we're venturing in different kinds of ways, there's that. But the usual kind of stimulation and input and interaction that dealt with our senses, it's just not happening. And so we're, sometimes we can be a car that's like just revving, and we're in neutral. And so there's no place to really do that. And that's part of our challenge now, is to figure that out, because if we put this all together in this trifecta of physical, emotional, and intellectual output, there's a lot of output, and some of the input isn't the way that we're used to having input. And so that can be overwhelming in itself. So it's like our bodies, our whole systems are trying to sort itself out to what is this? What am I getting? What am I not getting? I mean, is that part of your experience? I know it's been part of mine.
Totally. So, Glendy, thank you for being our guest today. Glendy Yeung is a certified sound practitioner, energy healer, and vibrational wellness educator. Glendy is the founder of Glendy Yeung Vibrational Wellness. So, Glendy, we talk about the invisible enemy. Now, can you tell us a little bit about the invisible energy and what happens in our homes, in our lives, that we do not see, but that is a very important element in our life?
I love the way Dr. Ryger break it down with the energetics and the physical, mental, emotional, all that ties into they're having an energy components to it. And from an energy healing standpoint, one principle often we embrace is that it's either we're congested, something is congested or depleted. That ties into our entire energy system, whether we talk about chakras, energy system, meridians, you hear about in traditional Chinese medicines and stagnation, right, in acupuncture. So what a lot of times that we have with this information overload, a thought, an emotion, and yes, they come through the screen, right, every interaction, all of those are energy that we pull in and receive during the course of our day. And you notice that when you meet someone, right? Maybe excitement and our body is not just right here. Our body has a lot more information transferred by electromagnetic field, like all around us, depends on how far, how strong our energies are, how far it goes. And all that accumulate, when we pick them up. So a lot of times when we feel fatigue and exhausted, yes, it could be depletion, but more often it's actually congestion. It's too much. Because our body naturally knows to look for equilibrium. Our body, both physical, mental, emotional, our body is a really sophisticated piece of machine that knows how to return back to equilibrium. A lot of times what prevented from doing so, that naturally doing so, it's all these extra things that we need to clear. So a lot of times the big principles in energy healing, it's actually like 85% clearing. So it's, the more that you are able to clear those layer of things, whether it's a mental energy, whether it's a physical exhaustions, right? Go into the physical, the cells, the muscles, and then naturally, your body would have an opportunity to regenerate itself and all those levels. I love that you brought up the screens, and especially since COVID, this period, and we all into our screens, and even a lot more so. And yes, there is, as you mentioned, Dr. Ryder, there is energy coming through, and it's different, and it's stronger in some sense, it's less in some sense, it's affect us in different ways. So one of the first thing that I from a very practical level, especially all of us on screen, that I like to point out is that the use of a blue ray filter. I have it on my eyeglasses. It just happens so that when I get my eyeglasses, this Blu-ray thing comes on. I'm like, sure, have it on. And you can get it for your iPhone. You can get it for your computer. And blue is in the spectrum of light among all the different colors somehow have a stronger energy than the rest of them. This is more from a medical physical standpoint. And because of that, our eyes can get more easily fatigued from this eye, and it actually could potentially lead to macular degenerations and other types of issues with the eyes. So I've seen all these Blu-ray filters coming out that it has ability to, again, just another layer of helping us not absorb so much of that type of energy. So that's one level. And especially when our eyes are tired, we feel, we can translate to our thoughts, well, maybe my eyes tired, my body's tired. So even though it's a physical thing that mingle into thoughts and emotions.
That's a great way of putting it, Glendy. And because that's how one of the ways that we bring the world in is through our eyes. And so when we have that kind of fatigue and that we're looking for the connection. And, especially I think for people perhaps who are living alone and they're not getting physical, other physical touch, right? which is such an important source of, it can be of comfort, of connection, of energy, as I speak to the energy expert here, and so it's different. And so can you talk a little bit more about our bodies, like just trying to adjust itself and going back into equilibrium?
Yeah. So our energy centers, there's so many different points of our biocircuitry, if you will. It's so very sophisticated. You have the traditional Chinese model or even the Vedic models, talk about the chakra systems and the meridians. And a lot of major centers has to do with an energy centers that actually modulating. It's like a funnel that modulating both directions. So it's just no different than our physical lungs, like it inhales and exhales. So our chakras, our energy systems, like inhale energy, exhale energy. So instead of like spinning, it's more like going back and forth, modulating. So certain energy centers is responsible for certain types of function. It actually correlate a lot with our organs function. So there are energy centers that picks up certain type of energy and ties into like emotions, ties into physical, ties into certain types of thought forms and whatnot. So they all, if the chakras, if you say it's congested, if it's too much, if you worry too much, a lot of people, we self-generate. Don't forget, it's in addition to just what's coming at us, right? It's our self-generating thoughts and emotions. So our solar plexus oftentimes get congested with the worries, right? And that from that on, most people like walk around with and therefore digestion's issue too. Think about that. Can translate into a physical level. So the more that we have the ability to, through those rituals and through habits, and again, toolbox in your tools to clear those things, those energies out, then the more that you have the ability to regulate it. So one of the one of the easiest way, I have many I've accumulated a lot of different tools, and they're for different people, right? Or different people might find them helpful in different circumstances. But even exercising alone, it's a very simple thing, and a lot of times notice that, especially for those who have the habits of regular exercise, you notice that how you actually energize after you exercise. And that is why, because exercising is one of the ways that quickest move energy out, congested energy out of you. Yeah.
So interesting. And do you think that it is possible that someone can physically do all the rituals? I'm doing my yoga class, I'm doing my breathing on a daily basis and so on, but they're not truly working their energy. It's like they're doing the movements, but something is missing in their life and their practice, and they think they're doing everything right. Can you tell us about that, Glendy?
Yeah, sure. And I think, like you mentioned, like it's a marathon. This is a marathon. Life's a marathon. I mean, there's no one type at all, but we kind of gather along the way breadcrumbs that and we each our own very individual, very special, unique needs. So yes, I mean, it helps that to do any of those rituals with a specific intention, because it's really linking up full alignments of your bodies and your thoughts and emotions, and truly what is fully aligned to what you represent and what your end goals you desire to be. And there are times that, yes, there are things that we do, but we do it, but we don't necessarily, we kind of object in certain level. Yeah. And then there are times that we're doing certain ththings, but it actually has a secondary gain, if you will. It's actually doing it for other purposes. So when you just think about when we're in conflict, the person's in conflict, whether it's mental, emotional conflict, right? Then there's something that's gonna not fully allow the energy to flow. So it might work a little bit. It might work to the full extent that when you truly, put your heart and soul into it and engage it in a way that is truly in full alignment.
And we'll return to the psychology and the psychological side of it. If we're working on our physical body and working out, and then we're working on our energetical body through those practices, but we might have some trauma that is pulling back the psychological body and the brain. And Dr. Ryger, how would you we see people sometimes that haven't really dealt with their past or the depth of the psychology and can escape through the energetical part to run away from that salvation. Can you tell us how the mind can self-sabotage as well and exhaust you without you thinking that it is happening?
Mhm. I'm thinking about what you're saying right now, and you're talking about trauma. And certainly this time is so full of uncertainty, and that it really can be just a very, very kind of full environment to trigger old traumas. And so there may be something that's happening with you and you don't know what it is and you don't know how to identify it. And so, one, if you can identify it, that's helpful. And the other thing is that if you can't identify it, at least know that there's something that's going on and be able to tell yourself there's something that's going on that I can't identify right now. And it doesn't have to be that we get kind of twisted internally that we can't identify, because of course we want the answer, we want to know, we want the answer, we want to be clear about it, we want to be able to move along with it. And so actually just today I was talking with someone and talking about there are two things. One is name it to tame it. In other words, to be able to identify what's happened and what it is that you're responding to so that you have a better understanding of what your triggers are. And even if you can't sort through them right now, and perhaps this may be a great time to do it, or it may be absolutely not a great time to do it, but being able to identify what some of your triggers are, that could be helpful in and of itself. And that's on the name it to tame it. The other part of it is that whatever it is, whatever traumas we've experienced, and I can't speak to individual traumas at the moment, but from trauma, if we are in our lives now, and there are ways that we're moving forward in our lives, and we're also being able to live a life that we've also learned from our trauma. We've also learned and developed some strengths from that, some abilities from that, some sorts of grit, perhaps, some sort of greater compassion. And so there's something, actually, it just happened this morning, and I'm going to call that, so there's name it to tame it. And then there's also trace it and embrace it. And so that for us to be able to also trace our strengths, trace our grit, trace compassion, trace empathy, trace different aspects of ourselves that we can put value to, and to be able to embrace that and really have ownership of it. And in that respect as well, bring power and empowerment to ourselves so that we can identify what's happened and or not, and also embrace, trace and embrace, what are where our strengths are coming from, and that those are ours.
And those are also the fundamental of therapy. It's to identify, to speak, to accept, to overcome. So I like what you're saying, Dr. Ryger. Glendy, can you tell us about your work with sound and the effect of sound, which is linked to one of our five senses? Can you tell us a little bit about the work?
Yeah. our senses has such sensory input has such an important information, giving us all the informations about like our sense of safety, our sense of where we are in the world. And a lot of times, tying back to fatigue, it is a really strong way to create positive input, to really use that senses to allow us to shift our state. And like I was talking, I was actually grabbing a bottle of essential oil that is lemon. In this case, it's to energize. So it's even 2 drops of that can inhale that. You can even have that shift. And similarly to scent, which we receive with our nose, but sound, we receive it not just with our ears, actually with our entire nervous system. So sound is the first senses set to develop when a baby is conceived. And the last sense is to go when we are passing on. So we can only imagine that like the aspect of hearing has a lot more to do with just our ability to register like language, how we use it every day. But more importantly, that the minor vibrations that we felt in our skin through our hair into our peripheral nervous system to inform us, how we are, who we feel, and our connections to our higher alignments. So using sound, it's a great way to shift our nervous system and help us to shift from our sympathetic nervous system to a parasympathetic nervous system, not a down ref, right? The flight and flight response to a rest and digest state. So, and a lot of times we receive sound, positive sound, right? Because sound is just a vibration. There can be, if you hear a siren, it creates the opposite effect, right? Your hair stands up, you all of a sudden jolt. Versus sound that creates certain types of tones and vibrations that pull us away from that flight and flight, going into the rest and digest mode. In fact, when you talk about corporate, right, corporations, it's working with to provide, especially in environment, to provide meditations for their employees. I work with corporations to provide in-person group meditations of sound. And it was really interesting to see just the energetic level, like the way the body language, the way that they walk in, what come out of the mouth, right? They, talk about, ask them how they feeling, whether it's stress and annoyance and anger and tired, right? And just simply with the receiving of sound, within, 30, 40 minutes, and then the language change, the skin, the color change, right? Their breathing change. So that all can happen with a different type of vibrations that put in. And more importantly, they because they shift in the body when they walked out that room, going back into the space, and even in the virtual setting, even they brought in a different set of, again, all the things, all the thoughts and all the emotions that they brought into the next engagements with someone.
Yeah. Glendy, would you mind sharing a favorite practice that you do that might be doable in the comfort of our own homes without special equipment, perhaps?
Sure. I have so many to pick. I would say, oh my goodness, I have so many to pick. For those that have a bathtub, I'll go back to bath all day long, and I kind of tire of here myself. But indeed, with the combinations of Epsom salt, which address our physical level, and sea salt and essential oils to address our energetic level, that is a really strong way to dissolve the emotional, the energy that we picked up, and also to disconnect any connections, sometimes like pulling and pushing connections that we have with situations and people, and dissolve that really gently. So there's so many different baths you can take, because water, it's a really strong and holding memory. So it's, that's why I feel so good in the ocean, right? Because it's really helped us to clear. So that's my number one. But I heard that a lot of people don't have bathtubs. And yes, you can use salt scrub, but that I would switch gear to talk to using sound. We can always create our sound to activate our vagus nerve system with humming. It doesn't have to be loud. And especially for those that, have experience in the subway, if you hum to the sound of like what the ambient sound that you hear, especially when noisy plays, you actually shorten the incoherence of the vibration. And you could use any tone, any vowels, words, and any, and you can just simply hum. And you can use any vowels. And if you don't want people to know, it can just be really loud. And even works, actually, even without humming out loud. You can just create sounds in your mind and connect to the energy that is generating, because you will feel it from, depending on the tone that you pick, it will from, the solar plexus, your heart, and your head. So that's one of the, and there's so many ways to play with toning, but that is one of the easiest way that anybody can do anywhere to change the state.
I love that. I love just thinking, just humming, that can recenter you, that can reconnect you and give you space to shift your state, the current state in your body, the current state in your mind. And thanks so much for sharing that. And then when I start humming around my house and my daughter is looking at me, I'll be able to point to you and say, well, Glendy told me I needed to do that.
Yeah. And we naturally know to do that too, right?
Yeah.
People realize you use it to self-soothe, and that is why.
But then she's going to watch the video and tell you, but Mom, Glendy also talked about silent humming. And so, which, by the way, I have tried. I was putting myself on silent as you were speaking, and I tried the humming, and then I tried the silent one. And it's true that you do feel up, down, depending on the sounds that you imagine that you're making. When we speak about energy, I've explored a lot traveling, and more than just traveling, really like exploring the cultures and what are the common threads. And so among religions, cultures, when it comes to resourcing our energy, so water is very present in all religions. And then you have salt as well, that is seen as a good luck thing and something for good energies. And just to tell you, in Morocco, for instance, in the Muslim and the Judaic religion, they tell you just spread salt in the corners of your house and it will protect you. And so it brings good energy. People do it in their stores to bring business and so on. And then sage. Can you tell us about sage, and why is sage present also in so many cultures as a purifier?
Yeah, it's not only sage. Actually, like you mentioned, many cultures has using so many different herbs for there are a lot of different purposes. So plant, it's just so incredible. They've been used in so many ways, and from from filling our belly with the salads to all the way to essential oils. I mentioned in certain portions of the plants, does different things. So using it, sage, meaning burning it, and also flower essence, and it's more the ethereal aspect. Just like our human body, we have a physical body, but we recognize we have emotions and thoughts and our spirits. So using sage and burning scents is more closer to the spirit spectrum, if you will, that accessing that parts of the plant that and different traditionally with Native Americans or different cultures has Indian, they have used it for different ways. And not only it's just it's igniting that using the fire, a transformative power, right? Igniting the certain spiritual aspect, energetic aspect that can do a lot of clearing. And it's very specific too. Certain plants are better for cleaning like dark energy. Some plants are better for bringing in uplifting and filling it with luck. So there's one of my teacher actually written a book about like the art of smudging with the different plants and different resins and different herb material. They all have their own gifts. They all have their, if you will, their personality, their soul, right, for different things. And it's fantastic. I do that all the time. In addition to a lot of energy work that I do, it's always one of my main staples. Yeah.
It's so interesting. For those who are listening to us and try to stay very rational in their thinking, which we all are, and we're very pragmatical, and we're doers, we're business owners, and so on. But you cannot just deny generations and generations and cross cultures of finding the same secrets and believing in the same things. And who are you to just come and say, yeah, but that's nothing? It's like nothing. Like hundreds and thousands of years, people found that there was something there. Yes, it is not something that you see in a bank account or in a, like in a paycheck at the end of the month, but it is something. There is an almond, there is that energy, and it's so important for us to cultivate a positive energy.
And so what I just will add to what you're saying is that I think that what you're talking about is so important, because we have a tendency, particularly in this country and perhaps other countries as well, where we put tremendous amount of value really on left hemisphere functioning. So that we're looking at logic, we're looking at language, we're looking at linear thinking, and that there's more to us than that. That we also have another part of ourselves that really needs to be acknowledged and nurtured also. And that's the part of us that doesn't filter through language. We find a way of expressing ourselves and expressing that in language at times, but also we express ourselves in movement. We express ourselves in art, that there are lots of nonverbal ways that not only do we express ourselves, but that we really need to take in and give out. And so when we look at the wholeness of ourselves and how we need to take care of the wholeness of who we are, and that we don't just value, one aspect. It's like having a bunch of kids and you only like one of them. I mean, because they're all different and they all bring something else. And so to be able to acknowledge, accept, and take care of the wholeness of who we are, and not leave aside the part of us that can, to your point, go into a tub and put Epsom salt and feel that. Hum with ourselves and feel what that feels like in our chests and in our hearts, and what we can experience. That experiential is also crucially important. It's not one or the other, but it's the totality and the wholeness. And so I personally want to thank you so much for bringing that today, because often it's not necessarily the first thing that people think about. I'm feeling stressed, I think I'll hum. But I will tell you that it's going onto my list. And thank you for your wisdom.
Thank you. Glendy, where can our audience find you? Is it on your website? Well, yes.
Yeah, my website is glendyyeung.com. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook. And I, in addition to, I host group sound healing, sound bath, as well as group energy work and private energy work as well. And then also work with teaching people how to empower themselves with working with energy. So I think this is a day and age, especially with what we're happening right now. Everybody needs to learn to take certain aspects of the responsibility and ownership of how to help themselves through this time.
Beautiful. Thank you, Glendy. Dr. Ryger, thank you for hosting us in your show today.
Yes.
For another amazing topic.
And as I say, whether you have sisters in your life or whether you weren't born with having sisters, that you can always find the sisterhood. And so we're thrilled that you're here joining us, and that there's always a spot waiting for you.